Hey guys, how are we all? Welcome back to the Twist the Bones podcast, where each week I sit down and I read and react to a bunch of spooky, scary, horrifying and weird stories that range from ghosts and the paranormal to real life encounters with creepy people or potentially dangerous people. So just like each week, I want to quickly go over some housekeeping things just before I do get into this week's story. So firstly, I will always credit the people who wrote these stories, so all of the information will be in the description of each episode if you want to go and support those content creators. And secondly, if you have your own scary story, so whether that be an encounter with a stalker or your own paranormal experience, and you want it to feature in a future episode, please reach out and send your story over to me. I would absolutely love to read it out in the podcast. So you can do this a number of different ways. You can do it by either using the Facebook page, which is just Twist the Bones Podcast, or you can email it to me at twistthebonespod@gmail.com, or finally you can actually submit it via Reddit, because I do actually have a new subreddit which is also just Twist the Bones Podcast. And I think that's it. So apart from that, let's get into this week's story. So this one's called The Little Old Church in the Bush. The story I'm about to tell you happened during the lockdown of 21. Though I wasn't meant to go no more than 5 kilometres from where I live, I thought F that and jumped into my old 78 Holden Kingswood, threw in my swag, esky filled with beer of course, and borrowed my best friend's little Jack Russell for company. The weather wasn't hot. In fact, it was raining, but I was bored, so F this, threw the dog in beer and food and esky, swag, and off I went. I love the bush. If you'd have read some of my earlier stories, you'll see that most of my supernatural experience seemed to happen in the forest. It was the last thing really on my mind. The dog was stoked. I was stoked. Yeah, I stopped here and there, either to take photos of the landscape or of an old abandoned farmhouses that dotted the landscape, or let the dog out so we could have a shit or a wee. It was getting on near dark and I needed somewhere to camp for the night. I found a dirt road and decided to follow it, see where it ends and maybe set up camp. Well, bugger me, that road went on forever, over small causeways, through small patches of forest, until I reached near the end of the road where Dog and I discovered an old church. I was surprised by this, as it was about the last thing I expected. I had no idea what religion the church was. All it was this little old church out in the middle of nowhere. Something about it bothered me. I got out with the dog, not his real name by the way, but we both explored it. It was, of course, run down, oddly smelt of burnt wood, but yet you couldn't see any burnt wood. And I don't think it had seen mass for one hell of a long time, as the windows were broken, some of the wood was rotted, and the roof was rusting. So Dog and I found a way in through the old vestry. Now, like Cher once sang, if only I could turn back time, well, I would have just then and reversed back and drive the hell away from that place. But I wasn't to know. The church still had pews in the pulpit where the vicar or priest gets up and does his magic trick as he spits brimstone on fire. Lol. I even found a tattered Bible, which I left as it was already eaten by mice and rats. Dog was getting nervous about something. He kept pushing himself into me as if saying, "Can we get the F out of here?" So I took the hint and left. But I took one last look around and suddenly felt unseen eyes watching me. This gave me the creeps, so I quickly hurried out with Dog pushing his way before me as if saying, "Dogs and children first, mate." Camp was set up, food was ready, beer to be drunk. Dog was a bit nervous about something, but he enjoyed his chicken necks and was munching on a bone. I was rolling myself a spliff. Hey, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, so why not? When we both heard what sounded like singing. Children singing, but out of key, coming from the old church. I have no idea what the song was, but it was weird. Dog started growling as the singing got louder. There was even an organ playing, but yet there was none in the church. I looked at the beer I was drinking and was tempted to tip it out. Then, it all went quiet. The rain eased off ages ago, so I sat there in my canopy of a tarp over the car and tent attached. It was silent. Then, they started to sing again. I thought I heard a panicking voice of a man. I should have went and explored, but no bloody way was I leaving the campsite. This time the singing stopped and didn't return. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning dawned grey and wet. I already had the Kingswood packed when Dog needed to do his morning pee and crap, so I followed him on a bit of a walk when we came to a graveyard with old headstones leaning over. Most headstones were dated back to the 1920s, and it hadn't seen a burial since then. I walked through and noticed that each headstone was deliciated to a child. And another thing about the headstones was that each child died the exact same day. Then I started to hear the singing again. I was out of there, so was Dog. I found out a bit later that a church back in the 1920s was destroyed by a bushfire. Inside the church, a Sunday school was happening. No one survived. Here's the catch. We went back there about 3 weeks back, and there was no sign of the church. The graveyard was still there, but most of the headstones were worn away and hard to read. It was the same road that Dog and I took. I'm still bemused to this day. So that is the end of that one, and that was on Your Ghost Stories Again, the website, and that was written by Aussie Red Dog. I would be absolutely terrified if that happened. If you knew full well that you'd had an experience where you'd been somewhere, you'd been inside a building, to then find out that that building doesn't exist, that's pretty scary. But then again, he was high and he was drinking, so I have no idea. You'll have to let me know what you think. So if you do want to leave me your thoughts, you can do this by heading over to my YouTube channel or the Facebook page or even the subreddit. It is completely up to you. But thank you so much for listening this week. Feel free to drop me your stories using, like I said, the Facebook page, YouTube channel, Reddit, the email, whatever you would like to do. And in the meantime, if you want to head over to my Instagram and keep up with me, it's just at Alien Queen Meg. But apart from that, I will catch you in my next one. Stay spooky, guys.